So Briahna Joy Gray pressed Khanna on Joe Biden's failures. This is a really interesting clip. Let's take a look and then I'll respond.
What I don't think is legitimate is to say, well, that Biden doesn't care about delivering for working families, because when I've now met with him a number of times, I think he's very sincere that he wants that $3.5 trillion bill to pass.
That's a bit of a straw man, Representative, if I may, because I certainly didn't say Biden doesn't care about working families. I don't really care what's in Joe Biden's heart. I care what he does. And if his actions don't reflect his actions.
I think he's fighting for it. I mean, I do think there's a limit to an American president's power in a 50-50 Senate.
But we just talked about what he could do by executive order, and there's no rationale for why he refuses to do those things he could do by executive order. Donald Trump also didn't have supermajorities in Congress, but managed to do quite a bit that there was a lot of hand-wringing about, meaningfully so, reasonably so, because he was able to do them by executive order. Why isn't Joe Biden doing the same?
I agree with you on the executive order on student loans. I mean, that I agree that he should do. I guess the point is, though, to look at the things that he has done. I mean, he did do an executive order at $15 for federal workers. He is pushing very strongly and will get, in my view, universal preschool, childcare, will get a massive investments in solar and wind. So I'm not saying that he's got a perfect scoreboard. And certainly, I was for Bernie Sanders becoming president. But in the context of his presidency, I think he has been more progressive than many of us expected. There are disappointments like student loans, but it seems to me that he really had his heart and soul in this fight for $3.5 trillion and has tried in many different ways and is really is genuinely stuck with the resistance of Sinema in particular. I think Manchin actually would have come on board, but Sinema gives him cover.
Is it Kyrsten Sinema's fault that we don't have student debt cancellation, immigration reform, marijuana legalization, or any of the other things that Joe Biden could do by executive order?
So there's two separate conversations going on here. One of them is how badly, if at all, does Biden want that $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill to pass? That's one of the conversations. The other conversation is, here are the things that Joe Biden can do through executive order. Why isn't he doing them? And I think I have answers for both of these things. On the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, does Joe Biden want it to pass? Based on everything I've seen to this point, my answer is I don't think he really cares if the price tag is $3.5 trillion or not. In fact, he might prefer a much smaller package. He might prefer a $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion package because, that is more in line with his politics throughout his entire career. Mr. I'm the grand bipartisan type, and I like to meet people halfway. And in this instance, if the Republicans have their middle finger up the entire time, and they say we have no interest about any of this other than the original $1 trillion or so infrastructure package. But on this reconciliation package, I think Biden does fancy himself more the Manchin type of Democrat or the Sinema type of Democrat than a Bernie Sanders type of Democrat. I don't think in his heart of hearts that Biden is as conservative as Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. I mean, Joe Manchin voted like 50 or 60% of the time with Donald Trump under Donald Trump. Biden's not that conservative, but on which side does he lean? Is he closer to Bernie or is he closer to Manchin on the spectrum? I think he leans a little more in the direction of Manchin. So if he got all Democratic senators on board for the $3.5 trillion bill, would he sign it? Yes, I think he would. But how hard is he going to fight? How hard is he going to go to the mat for the $3.5 trillion bill? I mean, I think we have our answer. He's not going to fight that hard. Now, you could say, well, Kyle, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, so how can you conclude that? I mean, it's actually really simple. If he wanted it, there would have been movement in his direction, and there hasn't been. Every time we get, one of these reports on what's going on behind the scenes, the price tag comes down and down and down and down, and we lose more things and more things and more things. Now, beyond that, clearly behind the scenes, whatever tactic he's using to try to get Manchin and Sinema on board, and maybe the other 7 or 8 Democrats who might be skeptical of it, whatever tactics he's using, even if you grant him that he wants the $3.5 trillion bill, it's not working. It's not working. It's failing miserably. But then the other point is, at some point, you would have a significant degree of public pressure being put on these other Democrats, led by Joe Biden, if he wanted this bill. He would use the bully pulpit. That's what you have as the president. You have the bully pulpit. You would have rallies in West Virginia. Invite union leaders to push for the $3.5 trillion bill. List the provisions. Put real pressure on them. Be strategic. Be tactical. Be intelligent. Fight in a reasonable way. We've seen none of those things. None of those things. So there's no real public pressure from Biden against the holdouts. And there's no reports of behind the scenes him playing the right political games. So in other words, if he did the carrot or stick approach, we would have had movement in Biden's direction. But there hasn't been movement in Biden's direction. So my guess is he hasn't given them an offer they can't refuse. The idea I keep going back to is you can tell Joe Manchin, look, man, if you don't vote for this bill, Merrick Garland's going to look into your family because we know about the EpiPen price gouging scandal that your daughter was involved in, and we have her on emails, dead to rights, basically saying we're going to price gouge people with this stuff. That's illegal. She can go to jail. You want your daughter to go to jail? I don't want your daughter to go to jail, but Merrick Garland's going to look into it because there is a violation of the law here. So I don't know what you want me to say. Now, if you do the right thing and you vote for the bill, not only will we not look into your daughter, but you'll also get another military base in West Virginia. You'll get X amount more infrastructure money. You can have a position in my administration, or family member can have a position in my administration. It's an offer you can't refuse. It's, I'm your best friend or I'm your worst enemy. You choose. Really between a rock and a hard place if you go after him like that now, isn't he? But he's not going to do that. He didn't do that. And there's no way he's going to do that. So now he's at the whim. He literally said the other day, oh, when I have as a slim majority as I have, every Democratic senator is the president. Well, clearly not, because Bernie Sanders ain't the president, because if that was the case, we would have already had this $3.5 trillion bill passed. It would have been a $6 trillion bill. So it's not that every Democratic senator is the president. It's that Manchin and Sinema are the president. And whatever they say, you go, yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. So there's your answer on that front. Would he sign it if it got to his desk? I'm sure he'd sign the $3.5 trillion bill if it got to his desk. But it's not getting to his desk, so then the question is, how are you going to fight for it? And the answer is, he's not going to fight for it in an effective way at all, or he's not going to fight for it at all. And he really just can't wait to get it down to $1.5 trillion, and then he can't wait to browbeat the progressives to fall in line and vote for it. Well, my message to the progressives is, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then the other question is, that Briahna keeps bringing up here is, how much is Biden committed to these executive orders that he could do? Now, just to give you guys an idea of what Joe Biden could do today with the stroke of a pen, he could free every nonviolent drug offender, every federal nonviolent drug offender. He could free them all today. He could abolish all student debt. He could do it today. He could effectively legalize marijuana by taking it off the scheduled substances list. Not doing that. He's not even lowering the ranking of it. He's not even saying it's not a Schedule 1, let's make it a Schedule 3 or whatever. He's not even doing that. He could also pull out of Iraq. He could pull out of Syria. He could stop indiscriminate drone bombings. He could give everyone health care with the swipe of a pen. There's a great article from David Dayen about how there's a provision in Obamacare that allows you, in emergency situations, basically do single payer. He could do that and say, COVID's the emergency. We're going to give everybody health care. He hasn't done that. So, if anything, the power of the president, it's not that it's overstated, it's that it's understated. You could do so much if you have a president who actually gives a shit and cares and is willing to use his power. And on that front, Ro Khanna even admits this, I think Briahna and I would have disagreements with Ro as to how bad Joe Biden wants the $3.5 trillion package. I don't think he cares that much. But on this one, we all seem to be in agreement. All these things he could do through executive order, he's not doing. Why? He doesn't agree with them. Which brings me full circle to the original point, which is, I think on the spectrum between a Manchin-type Democrat or a Bernie-type Democrat, Biden is closer to a Manchin-type Democrat. I'm not going to tell you he's exactly the same as a Manchin-type Democrat, because a Manchin-type Democrat wouldn't have signed the $15 minimum wage executive order for all federal employees and contractors like Biden did. I don't think Manchin would have signed right to repair like Biden did. I don't think Manchin would have pulled out of Afghanistan like Biden did. So I'm not going to wage a war on nuance and say, he's exactly like Manchin. That's just not true, so I'm not going to say it. But I do think he's closer to a Manchin type than he is to a Bernie type, and I think that's relatively obvious. So, but look, we're going to talk more about this in the future. Is there an out for House progressives? if they get fed a heaping pile of dog shit with this reconciliation package, some $1.5 trillion bill with almost nothing on climate, nothing punitive on fossil fuel companies, is there a way out for progressives to actually win in the negotiation, even though they would be caught dead to rights and seem like they lost terribly? More on that in the future. There's an interesting thing. There's an interesting chess move that can be pulled, but we'll talk about that in the future. But credit to Briahna Joy Gray for holding Ro Khanna accountable. Credit to Ro Khanna for taking the tough questions. Fact of the matter is, Biden doesn't care all that much about this bill in its totality, and he clearly doesn't agree with any of the executive orders he could do, which is very damning, because we're in a transformational moment in American history, and we have a status quo president for the most part. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.